Welcome, everyone. We are at the top of the hour, and I see people are starting to join. So we'll give it maybe a minute or so. It's like popcorn. We'll know when it stops popping, but there's about a dozen people. Wait, it's over 20 now. It's just about 30, so we'll give it another 30 seconds, let's say. People are still joining, so welcome to the webinar. We're going to give it another minute or so, and then we'll get started. About 40. Let's see, and people are still joining, so we'll give it another 15 seconds. It's slowing down. Perfect. All right, let's get started. From the outside, a house can look just fine, but if the foundation is faulty, the result can be catastrophic. The lesson here is a high quality foundation is important. It's critical, in fact. My name is Barry Solomon, and I'm from Foundation, Litera's experience management platform. And for those of you who are familiar with Foundation, you know that the foundation of Foundation is high quality data. That's why I'm here today with Josh and Wade to discuss how the integration of UniCourt's high quality litigation data into Foundation will improve how we can support litigation practices. But before we get started, let's introduce ourselves. Josh?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm Josh Blondie, the CEO and co-founder of UniCourt, a litigation and analytics platform.
Hey, everyone. Wade Malone, Principal Product Manager here at UniCourt. I work on our litigation knowledge graph and integrations like this one into Foundation.
And as I said, my name is Barry Solomon. I'm with Litera. I joined Litera when they acquired Foundation, a company I was part of about 5 years ago. Here at Litera, I still spend a lot of my time with Foundation. So let's get started and take a look at that first. In order to capitalize on your firm's experience and your lawyer's expertise, it requires bringing data in from a lot of different data sources and then adding additional context if that data doesn't already exist somewhere. And once you bring it all together, it's extremely valuable. But typically at firms, a lot of this data is in data silos, and some of it is in just the heads of lawyers, or maybe in some off-site database like a court docketing system. And that's exactly what Litera Foundation does. You know, we bring data in from your internal data sources as well as your external data sources, such as from UniCourt. We then will transform that information, connecting the dots among your matters, your clients, your lawyers, and third parties. And then Foundation makes it easy to use this information in a variety of use cases. In fact, our customers constantly are surprising us because they come up with new and innovative ways of using Foundation. And the use cases, once you have the platform in place, the possibilities are endless. But if you haven't seen Foundation, I think it's easier to understand by actually seeing it. So what I'm going to do is a very quick demo of Foundation, just so you can see it in action. But if you aren't familiar with Foundation, please reach out, because as I said, Foundation can handle so many use cases, it's important to first understand your needs so that we can show you what would be of most interest to you. But let's say that I'm working on a project and the project requires that I find representative matters for both transactions and litigation. But I'm going to start and focus on transaction matters. And then later I'll let Wade show you how Foundation can work with UniCourt's litigation data. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and look for some representative matters. So as I said, Foundation can manage information about your matters, clients, lawyers, and other firm personnel, as well as third-party contacts and companies and lots of other information. In our quick example, I'm just going to look at some matters. And I want to narrow this down, and I can do that in a lot of different ways. I'm going to just do it in a simple way using the filters here. I want a certain type of matter, just capital markets matters, and I want in a certain industry, let's say the real estate industry. So that starts to narrow it down. I want to narrow it down even further. I mean, this particular matter involves real estate investment trusts or REITs. So I can go ahead and type in just free text and it'll search all of those matters for that information and it'll show me where that appears on the matter. So I'm able to then get representative matters because maybe I need to do a budget for a new matter and I want to compare it to other similar matters, or maybe I'm trying to win business as a lawyer and I want to talk about similar matters with my client so that they're going to trust us because we've done it before. Or maybe I'm a lawyer negotiating an agreement and I want to find other similar matters so that I can maybe talk to the lawyers who worked on those matters or look at the documents associated with them. But another common thing that I may do is once I get my representative matters, I want to look at the lawyers who worked on those matters. And so I could either start a brand new search, or since I know these are the particular matters I want, I can just pivot to see, hey, these are those lawyers who have experience with those matters. If I want to filter it further, maybe I just want to look at the partners, and then I can do something, just like I could put them on a pitch or a proposal, or if I just want to quickly export them to PowerPoint, to Excel, or maybe to Word. I just want to go ahead and look at the bios for this particular set of lawyers. I'm able to very easily and quickly export that and then use that. HR might use that because they're doing interviews of a lateral partner, or maybe I'm going to have lunch with a partner and I want to introduce them to some of my colleagues that have the exact experience they need. I could go on and on, but the point is I did half of the project finding the transaction lawyers that are needed for this particular matter that I'm working on or opportunity. But although that works great with transactional matters, sometimes there's a problem or a challenge firms have with litigation information. And I think the reason for that is that most firms, transactional partners, are pretty motivated to provide information about their deals for things like league tables. Unfortunately, there's really not that same motivation for lawyers and litigators. And as a result, what I see often is that litigation data is locked in the heads of the lawyers, and they just don't have the time or the inclination to provide that information and enter that. And the result is that the litigation data can be incomplete or available somewhere else. And this is where my friends Josh and Wade and the data in UniCourt come into play. So Josh, let me hand the baton over to you.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. This litigation data does lie somewhere else, and it typically lies in courts, which is kind of what we consider to be the kind of source of truth. But what's been recorded in a court regarding a matter. And this is kind of where UniCourt comes in. We're a litigation data and analytics platform that's really about delivering this highly structured docket data to wherever you want it. Some of those cases can be in first-party applications that we build, and other use cases, they fit perfectly in products like Foundation. UniCourt covers about, we have the largest docket data set in the US. It's spanning about 4,000 plus state and federal courts. It comprises over about, or a little over 2 billion dockets and documents sitting in our database now. And we've been doing this for about 10 years, which means we've really developed robust processes around reliable connections to the court. We all know aggregating this data can be fraught with issues in terms of reliability, and we've built a lot of redundant systems to make sure that this data pipeline is not impeded. One of the other things that UniCourt does after we acquire this data is we put a lot of structure on top of that. We put it all into a common data standard, which means we duplicate it, we normalize it, which is extremely important when you're integrating into a product like Foundation. And the normalization means we uniquely identify the players involved in the litigation, the attorneys, the law firms, the parties. And most importantly, we connect it to a knowledge graph that we'll talk a little bit more about and how that's relevant to the Foundation integration. And UniCourt does this all with a API first methodology, which basically means before we ever begin to think about doing an integration or developing a product, we always develop APIs for those first so that we can give our clients access to the exact set of APIs that we're developing off to actually create products, which means they're kind of unbound on what they can do with this structured data. After we develop these APIs, we then turn this into game-changing insights. We enable AI-enabled search over the cases and documents. We create litigation profiles and histories and analytics of the key players. And we also are able to summarize and extract important content that lies very deep within documents. Now, with that said, let's, I think seeing it in action speaks a lot more about the capabilities of UniCourt and how that's relevant to Foundation. So one of the queries I decided to use today, I think it does a good job illustrating the mapping of our data and data objects that we've structured is, I created a query, and I'll make it a little bit bigger here so everyone can see that. A query saying, show me New York cases against State Farm involving bad faith claims since 2020. Let's go ahead and run this query. And you'll notice an interesting thing happens after we finish the query off here. And I'll go ahead and fast forward this in the interest of time. Well, here we go. You'll notice it did some interesting things, really advanced things. Is the first, the natural language query understood that State Farm was a party. It was a defensive party role. Again, those are objects that we classify. It knew it was looking for bad faith claims within documents. It knew time periods, and it picked all of the New York State courts automatically. And so these are all of our data objects that are being mapped to LLMs through a search. Now, we could also take this to one level deeper if we said, hey, this is great, but I want to filter this a little bit further. One of the things I want to add to this query is case types. I want to limit this, for example, to maybe commercial and trade, which is typically where a bad faith claim would reside. And let's go ahead and minimize that slightly so I can get to it. Let's run that query again. And one of the things you'll notice while this query is running here is we're now moving into more advanced queries where we're creating, you'll see this complex query language that's being created. This is actually the query that's now used directly into our APIs. So if I wanted to pull this exact data set through our APIs, I could do that, or I could even go to a more advanced and I could build something like a query builder. So I could say, for example, I want to pick State Farm, or I want to pick another party to that, and I could say, or I'm looking for, Allstate. And I could add an array of different, very advanced parameters to pull a data set out and through the APIs or actually through the application. Now, one of the cases that I chose here, which one of the first results, a case that was recently filed in New York, was Vincent Menino versus State Farm. I'm going to go ahead and open this case up here. And these are the typical things you'd expect that we could begin to populate into Foundation itself. You have things like the case number, status of the case, standardized courts, filing date. This was a recently filed case, so there's no judge associated with this case yet, and a standardized type of case. It's a commercial and trade and contract case. We also capture docket entries. We capture all the documents associated with the case. So for example, if I wanted to dump in the complaint into our DM system and link it into Foundation, I could do that. I have the ability to grab any documents on demand. I have the ability to refresh this case on demand, which is really important because one of the big challenges we've heard when people try to bring docking data into Foundation is it's difficult to keep up to date, requires a lot of manual effort. Some of the other things I can see on this case are the parties and who's representing them. We'll come back to this in a second. I really want to jump to, history. We capture all of the history on a case. Anything that changes on a case is added, removed, or changed, so much so that a lot of docking teams rely on this information for deadlines. And I'm going to go back to the parties attorneys. I think this is where it gets really interesting with Foundation. So you'll see there's some hyperlinks here for the attorney, this Scott Agulnik and Agulnik Krimen. I'm going to go ahead and open Scott's profile here in the next tab. And this is where we're beginning to now seed this entity data into Foundation. So one of the things you'll notice is we got his profile information where Scott works. So we've uniquely identified him, not only in any state that he's barred in. So if he was barred in more states than New York, we would see that. We have case counts. So he's handled 786 cases. We know he does mainly almost 90% of his business is plaintiff work. We got his case filings by year. We have the types of cases that he handles, mainly commercial, trade, insurance, personal injury, tort. And we know where Scott files his cases. Looks like he does a little bit of federal work, mainly state work. Some other interesting connections we're making is we know who are the top opposing attorneys to Scott and how often he's faced them. We know law firms Scott has moved to over time. So he was originally Greenblatt and Gulnik, and it became a Gulnik Kremlin. We know the corporate parties Scott has represented. These are also normalized. We know the judges he's been before and how often, and we know all of the cases that we calculated these analytics from, the 798 cases involving Scott. Now, I think going back to the presentation here, I think the really important piece is we are taking this litigation knowledge graph, as we call it. This is now the linkage between these normalized entities, and we're now linking things from dockets to attorneys, dockets to judges, dockets to parties, dockets to firms, and dockets to documents. So now imagine within Foundation, you can connect your dockets to your matters, and you can begin to ask some very interesting questions. And with that being said, I'd love to turn it over to Wade to have him help answer the question that we've all been asked in a firm, the frantic question we've all been asked in a firm at one time or another.
Thanks, Josh. Yes, I think here's a situation you're probably all familiar with. Share. Help, I have to respond to a panel RFP tomorrow. I've got the transaction data from Foundation, but now I need the litigation experience. Who at my firm has appeared before Judge Joel Wofield in San Diego Superior Court, preferably defending a personal injury case? I bet a lot of listeners here have sent or read a firm-wide email asking just that kind of question. So now we'll jump into our final demo where we've taken a large law firm's California litigation data from UniCourt, integrated it into Foundation, and see how easy it is to answer this kind of question. So here we are, just to orient you. On the left, you'll see filters like Barry showed you previously, but these filters are about litigation, case type, court, judge, and here we have our matters listed on the right. So let's filter to Judge Wofield. Here we go. We've done 3 matters before Judge Wofield in the last 10 years. It's that easy. Let's go a little deeper to look into these matters to see how we got there. At the top, you've got some typical matter information in Foundation. We've got some placeholder data in there. But what I want to focus on is this UniCourt case object. This object contains all the data we've integrated and brought over from UniCourt. So the case name, as it is officially in the court, Gates versus Jewel Labs, the case number, the court, San Diego County Superior Court, when the case was filed, the current status of the case, it's closed, it's stayed, the case type, this is a civil, personal injury torts, product liability case, a link to the case in UniCourt, showing just the kind of page Josh just showed you, and then the judges, Judge Wofield, that's what we're looking for. Also, our attorneys, and then the opposing counsel, plaintiff's law firm, Kisa Law, and then our client, Jewel Labs, and the situation where Gibson done. There's a couple things I want to emphasize about this data. Number one, it's automatically updated. UniCourt will update these cases with the court on whatever schedule you want and push these updates into Foundation. So they're always up to date. So if a new judge gets assigned, opposing counsel joins the case closes, any of these data points change, that will just update automatically. You don't have to worry about it. The second thing to drive home about this data is that it's all normalized. And Josh talked a little bit about this. These aren't just text fields. All of these, data points are supported by, unique IDs behind the scenes, which makes them searchable and linkable. So like taking court as an example, there's only one way to phrase and spell San Diego Superior Court of California in our data. All the matters that are in that court have this exact same link to this court entity. So that avoids the kind of duplication and inconsistency we sometimes see if people have tried to kind of enter this data manually. Same thing with case type. This is UniCourt's classification system that applies across our entire case universe. So again, that makes searching easy, gives you one consistent way to look at types across courts. And finally, the entities, of course, are normalized as well. That's how we could search for Judge Wofield, is we've got that entity linked to these different cases. Same benefits of searchability and consistency there. And then last thing on this, going back to our kind of RFP response, we could easily find the 3 matters that our firm had done before Judge Wofield, but that also unlocks, we know exactly what attorneys to go bug if we want more information for our RFP. Anything we should say to demonstrate how well we know Judge Wofield, or was this matter particularly interesting that we want to highlight? Again, you don't have to email everyone. You now have the defined list of the really relevant attorneys to go talk to. And so zooming back out, just like we search for judges, you can also search for case types, courts, or kind of whatever data points you want to help with the RFP, or kind of whatever use case you want to do with working with your litigation experience data. With that, let's jump back to our final slide. So to sum up today, litigation data from UniCourt will supercharge your foundation investment. And we'll do that by these features on the left. Enrich matters with standardized litigation data. In the demo I just showed you, we showed you courts, case type, case status, judges, attorneys, law firms, parties. We can bring over other UniCourt data points as well. And again, to emphasize that standardized point, these are standard normalized data. That's what allows you to accurately search and filter to cut the data however you want. And we'll automatically sync the matters to their dockets. UniCourt is already updating thousands of cases every day with our broad court coverage. We will update yours and push those into Foundation automatically. And then finally here on the left, summarize and extract custom data points. We didn't get to this in the demo, but if there are other data points you want to systematically pull out of your dockets or documents, we can do that and push that to Foundation. An example would be like complaint summaries or other things you kind of want to get out of documents in all of your litigation matters. So what does that get you? On the right, the benefits, a comprehensive view of your law firm's experience. As Barry mentioned, a lot of things we hear from customers are they've got some data in there. Some group was really on the ball with entering data, but not every group, so it's inconsistent. This gives you the full picture. Second, you can respond to RFPs faster and with less manual work. As you saw in the demo, that took a few clicks to find your experience in front of a judge, and you could search around by other data points too. As we did this and talked with Barry, right, the Foundation has a lot of the tools you need, but then you need UniCourt's litigation data to give them something to work on. And then no more manual data entry. I think if you're on this call, I don't need to sell you on this point. Litigation can take years, things don't change, they change all at once. Humans, and I include lawyers in this category, are not built for keeping up with or entering this kind of data. So don't bother, automate it. What this also means is no more firm-wide emails asking about experience in X case type before Judge Y in Court Z. And lastly here, a quick and easy integration. UniCourt has most of your public litigation data already. We can work with your Foundation team to plug it in and get you up and running quickly. And with that, let me turn it back over to Barry and Josh.
Yes, so I was going to suggest that if you have questions, you put them in the question chat, but I see people have already been furiously typing, so keep them coming. We will answer what we can on the call today, and if we're not able to answer it on the call today, we will follow up with you. But in terms of next steps, we're going to be following up, sending out an email so that you can know how to get a hold of us. You can see both Josh and my email there. If you're an existing Foundation customer, perhaps we've met before. I could see a couple of friends have already put in some questions. Feel free to send me an email. If you don't know the folks at UniCourt, I'll make an introduction. Happy to help you start to evaluate, if you already have Foundation, how you could use UniCourt to do even more with Foundation.
And for the UniCourt customers on the call, if you'd like to learn more about Foundation, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to make an introduction to Barry. It's a very powerful product that can really give you a complete view of all of your firm's experience, both litigation and transactional. Now, I see quite a few questions coming in here, so I'm going to kind of maybe bucket some of these. I think there's one that's centered around How do we match your matters to the public dockets, and how does that sync work? That's a great question. In fact, it's probably the first question you should ask. We do this kind of in 2 steps. There is a historical set that you're going to have. So we'll get your matter data, which will be bits and pieces of what you've collected, the main party, some version of the case caption or case name, right? Some version of the case number, if you have it, would be ideal. And we have a docket matching API that we use to pass that data through, and it will return back the best match with confidence, with a confidence factor associated with it. Typically we'll match about, going back about 10 years, we typically match about 95% of your cases. In the event we don't have a case that's in our database, no big deal. We can always go out and import that case from the court directly. So that's step 1, is kind of backfilling this kind of historical set you have. The next step is how do we sync it? The syncing works in a very similar fashion. Again, through this integration using our APIs, when a matter is opened, right, and there's certain fields that are passed into that, then it's going to automatically check UniCourt on some schedule to see if that case, if we were able to match that case. All of our cases have unique IDs, just like all of your matters. So once that connection is made, it's easy to stay in sync then. And at that point, you can now set the schedule of how often you want your matters updated: daily, weekly, monthly, or whatnot. Looking through some other questions here. One of the questions I had, are there a lot of manual efforts required to keep Foundation updated with new docket information? Once the implementation's done, no, it automatically should work the exact way I just described. When a matter's open, as long as you're giving us certain fields to work off of, we can then automatically match that and bring that into Foundation. And Barry, I'll have you peruse through some of these too if you see some. One of the questions is, do you have document level coverage of state courts? If all, how many? We have over 3,000, probably closer to 4,000 state courts. I would say the vast majority of courts provide document level access. There are a few exceptions to that where they just provide dockets only. So yes, it is not only possible, but common for our clients to not only update their dockets, but also sync so that they can dump all of these documents into their DM system to enable workflows, to enable content collection around experience.
Yeah, one of the questions has to do with any features we're adding with AI once we, put this integration in place. The comment I'll make is that we're continuing to innovate at Litera with additional features and functions. So, for example, we just added in our last release the ability to translate narratives from one language to another using GenAI. You pick the languages that your firm cares about. Those types of things will automatically be available with whatever data is brought in. We also, many of you are already familiar with Litera 1 and Lido. The types of insight that we're bringing in from UniCourt will be available. For those of you who are familiar with Foundation Proactive, which is an optional, additional kind of proactive CRM module, being able to use the type of signals that you would get from UniCourt are available there. Tapping lawyers, kind of nudging lawyers to take action, and then so I guess the short answer is we're going to be continuing to innovate. This data is necessary for GenAI. This becomes part of the resource that's available for us to continue to innovate with that.
Yeah, and one example too of that is we have another product called DEEP, which stands for Docket Extraction Enrichment Pipeline, and it essentially allows you to extract out and summarize content from documents. That's what kind of Wade alluded to, that we can pipe that into Foundation, because one of the things we run across over and over is it would just be great to have a summary of what this matters about, because nobody goes back and actually adds that. And so the types of claims, for example, a whole host of other things that can be extracted out. Event types, right? Motions. This leads to another question. In RFPs, we get asked about how many jury and bench trials for attorneys. Is that data brought in? Great question. UniCourt is working right now on our case outcome data, which includes juries and trials. That will be associated with the attorneys, like I showed you earlier, around the kind of normalized attorney and law firm, courts as well. We are starting, that will be released in Q4 for New York, will be the first state that we're adding the outcomes to it, followed by California, Florida, and Texas. Looking through other questions here.
Yeah. Josh, a good question, because I was very surprised at how quick and easy it was. Several questions all around, hey, what's the timing of this? How long does the integration take once a law firm, has both Foundation and UniCourt?
About 30 to 90 days. First piece of that is matching. That's usually done in about a week's time. Then we'll work with you on any of the customization you may want to bring in terms of if there's other data objects you want to pipe into Foundation and kind of what your syncs looks like. But typically you can get it up and running within 60 to 90 days.
Yeah. I think you had a slide earlier on your coverage, but there's a number of questions. I know you kind of addressed it, but a specific question is around state courts. And, I know that when I've talked to Foundation customers about various solutions, one of the issues is they do a great job with federal courts, but really not that many state courts. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, in fact, UniCourt actually started aggregating state court data long before we added the federal. So I think we're, as I mentioned in a slide I briefly touched on, we're in about 40 states, comprising about 4,000 plus courts. We pull also everything down from federal as well. If a court portal or feed provides access to the documents, we will provide access to the documents. The great news is probably about 65% of courts have free documents that are just sitting there waiting for you to ingest for experience. So we have the deepest and broadest coverage of any docking systems, and our clients tell us over and over again, we also have the best structured data that's easy to work with. I think that's a huge important point to make. There are other APIs out there for accessing this data. Unfortunately, they don't use a good common data standard with those. We've seen some that literally have a different data format for every court that you pull data from, which makes it impossible to do any type of integration, or some that just don't work, they don't sync. One of the other question is, do you have to go through other systems, other third-party integrations like Courtroom Insight, docketing systems, Courtroom Insight, to bring this data into Foundation? You do not. We actually built a direct connection with Foundation. We think it's really important for our clients to be in charge of their data flows coming in. If I was designing systems in a firm, I would bring it into through direct connections or bring it into my data lake. That way I'm not stuck with someone in the middle of my data flows.
Wait,
housing.
the example you gave was a single law firm, single judge, and there's a couple of questions around what happens if there's more than one of these entities.
Yes, we'll bring those both over in with the when we do the integration, we can display multiple law firms if there are multiple opposing counsel or multiple judges, that kind of thing.
And the field you've chosen to target that doesn't just take a single entity but multiple, right? So
Correct.
it just shows up the way it would normally show up in Foundation.
Correct.
And you have a couple of options. Yes, you could bring all of it in. You also have the ability to link it out to UniCourt itself. So if you want a more traditional docket view to go through, you have kind of both of those options. In fact, that's what we recommend for implementation. Is it possible to automatically show who the lead plaintiff is on class actions the same way you show plaintiff counsels on Foundation? Yes. If a court tells us the representation type, in many cases for class actions, that is the case. We do classify representation type, so there is a lead classification for that.
And I do see one in here about is it required for firms to kind of preload, courts, judges, and data points? No, like we can, when UniCourt does the integration, we can bring over all of our standardized courts, judges, and things like that.
And maybe Wade, if you could talk a little bit about that. This comes up all the time too. If a firm already has a taxonomy or list of things that they want to continue to use, right? How does that work?
Yeah, and we've had that go different ways. Some firms, once they've sort of seen our exhaustive kind of core taxonomy, are like, oh, actually, we don't want to try to use ours. We just want to move to yours. But if you do want to kind of have some kind of hybrid system, we can do some of that mapping. Again, because this is all structured data, we can do things that would be part of the initial kind of onboarding and figuring that out. And we would do a kind of one-time mapping process of, oh, okay, your Judge Wofiel is our Judge Wofiel. And once we kind of tie those together for anything on the firm side, then we can make it work.
Wade, I noticed a couple of folks must be somewhat technical because they're asking, they're familiar with Foundation. They're asking about the Foundation Hub, which you can set up to bring data in on a periodic basis versus APIs, which of course, if you want to, could do real time. I don't think we do real time. You decide, are you doing it daily or more or less often, I believe. But could you describe just a little bit about how you actually technically are doing that integration?
Yeah, I think there's a couple options. I think most of that we'll have to get into a specific conversation with the client there, but one of our integrations is set up to use the hub as kind of the easiest, straightforward way to put data in and out on a daily basis.
Yeah. All right, I think kind of like the popcorn of people joining, there may be some questions that we missed. We tried to put them together.
There was a lot of questions here so I think it would be great to take some of these, Barry, post a webinar here and kind of bucket them in themes and get some answers back with you.
Yeah, I think we can include that with our, with the follow-up email. And so we could send some information and then we can bucket these and because it's a little different. I'm surprised. I do a lot of webinars. This is probably more questions than I've ever received, and a lot of them are the same. So we're trying to do our best. If we missed you, it isn't because we wanted to. We were just trying to get to all of them and not duplicate. So with that, just to remind you, if you're a Foundation customer, feel free to reach out to me and or your AE, your customer success manager or account executive. If you're a UniCourt customer, feel free to reach out to Josh or his team. And Josh and Wade, this was fun. And thank you, everyone, for being so engaged. And we'll try to get to all of your questions. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Thanks for having us on, Barry.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.